So we were talking about just your art. We were
Oh,
talking about loving doing what we do and how it all of a sudden it becomes a source
I
of
quit.
income in your life.
I quit playing music after a while. I fell out of love with music after quite a while. I was working. I quit my last band. I was living in Atlanta, and I was working at Guitar Center. And after several years of being there, I just didn't want to play music anymore. It just kind of like took the whatever out of it for me.
Yeah.
And one day I came home and I had a roommate and she was painting, and it was like some sad girl kind of painting stuff, like whatever. And I hadn't done any artwork. Probably the last real artwork I had done were some band flyers in Hollywood. And
Yeah.
prior to that, I couldn't even tell you. And then I just started painting. I put a friend of mine owned a bar up the street that I used to go drink at all the time. That was within walking distance. So I took these paintings up there to her. She put them up, and then about a week later, I went back. I sit down, the paintings are gone, and she hands me an envelope. I was like, I should pay attention to this shit because they sold like that week. It was great. That was literally how this thing jumped off.
That's crazy. And isn't it weird when you look back when you were starting, you almost think, how did I sell that? I'm sure, because I know a DJ and I go, wait, how did I do that? I know so much more now, but
Yeah,
it still just worked. You still had something, and it's like the beginnings of a band or something.
no one loved me at the time, because if they had, they would not have let me sell those paintings because they were so bad. No one said,
Probably
don't do
weren't.
this.
They probably weren't. You know what I mean?
Don't do this. Don't do this. Hold on. You can do better. No, I just off I go, which is kind of like how I do everything. But
Yeah, you got to
it,
jump off and jump in.
yeah, man. So how long has it been since I've spoken to you?
I think decades. You're probably pretty
Eas-
ugly era. Probably pretty ugly era, I would think.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I can't even remember the last time
Mhm.
that I spoke to you. Definitely not in person. I mean,
Yeah.
the
You
LA.
feel a connection with everybody, this tribe of us that are still here and still doing our things that have pushed out of music. It's still all music, but it's just different
Yeah,
form of music in a way. You know what I
I'm
mean?
still in touch with a lot of people. Like I'm still in
Yeah.
touch with a lot of folks. I talk to Jamie almost at least once a week or so about something.
Yeah. It's like a tribe and we survive. You know what I mean? It's like
It
we
really,
went to a war or something. And you know what I mean? It's like Band of Brothers or something.
I can't tell half the stories I have in my life to anyone who wasn't there.
Yeah.
If people weren't, if the person I'm talking to wasn't in that Hollywood time frame that we were part of, half the shit I say sounds like a fucking crazy person.
It does. It does. You realize you do. When did you end up out there? It's funny because we all ended up about the same. How did you end up out there? And where did you?
I I lived in Long Beach for a little while as a kid. I'm from Florida, born and raised mostly, here and there, some moving around. But we moved out to Long Beach for a while when I was a kid. My stepdad got a job out there, and we moved over by the marina, and we were out there for quite a while. And then all of a sudden, he got another job, and we left Long Beach and went back to Florida. It was the last thing I ever wanted to do. I had built myself a little life. We would take a bus from Long Beach into Hollywood to go see Wasp or something. And
Wow.
we were these little miscreant kids that would just take off for the weekend, go into Hollywood and disappear, and then go home for school.
Oh
And
my
did that
God.
like
So you really were doing Hollywood and then you had to leave?
as a little guy too. Like, I mean, like 15, 14, I'm fucking on a couple buses with a skateboard going into town.
Wow.
So then they yank me out of there, and I go to this place called Winter Park, Florida, which is a suburb of Orlando. It couldn't have been less of interest to me. And I got here, and there wasn't really anything going on. I was miserable. Um, and then I found some people. I found some punk rock kids, and I found like the punk rock kids bar, and Lords of the New Church played, and I got to go to that, and I met more people, and so I found some folks, but I was miserable. So the way I got out to LA was I swore to myself that like the last day of school, I'm in my fucking car and I'm going. I just left. I had saved every bit of money from a couple of jobs I had, and I just packed it into this little Chevy Nova and hauled ass out to LA. Didn't know where I was going, didn't have a couch lined up, didn't have anybody, had nothing. I had met one guy, this guy Moxie. I had met him, and I knew some guys in a band called Lip Switch. Remember those guys?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I knew some of those guys, but not well enough to go, hey man, can I stay at your place? But what happened is I wound up crashing on their couch. And so Lip Switch took me in for the first little while that I was in LA. That's
Remember
like
they had
those
the star outside Gazzari's at that time when I got there. They had a star on the. They were good. They had the
they
star on the
really.
Gazzari's wall.
Oh, I had no idea. They took me there. They took me. In fact, the first night I got into town, the very first show I saw when I moved back to LA was Funhouse at Club with No Name.
Wow.
They took me to that. They're like, we're going to this band. We're going to go see this band at this club and blah, blah, blah. I have no idea. Like, I'm just like, let's, whatever we're doing, let's do that. And that was the first thing, the first show I saw.
And Funhouse with all the stripes, they had their
It,
trip.
it blew my mind, man. I work with Mark on projects sometimes. And like, he's still so fucking inspiring. Like those guys, they were the entire time I was out there, one of my most, if there was a Funhouse gig, I was there. Like, I didn't care what was going on. I was there.
And they opened for Guns at that big, those whiskey shows where Guns N' Roses before it was done at clubs. You know what I mean?
They were supposed to be the next Guns N' Roses too. Like they had a lot of shit going on. And
MTV and everything. I mean, they were on MTV.
Yeah. And that was the first show. And from then on, I was just like, you know, I just felt like I was back. I felt like I had plugged back in and I wasn't going anywhere. And I was really excited. And I just put shit together. Couldn't find a band out there then. So I did take a trip back to Florida. I met some guys in Daytona. And those guys were telling me that they were headed back out to LA. And I was like, oh, I just left. They're like, well, we're going. And that would be what became Beautiful Destruction with those guys that I met in Daytona. So we all reconvened back out in Hollywood. It was a lot of cross country, a lot of back and forth.
And what year did you move out? When you say you finished school, what year was that?
89.
Isn't it weird? Like I was 88. It was the same time we were all just like post Guns N' Roses, just going out. We were all just going out there.
Yeah. Yeah. It was wild too. And it was the whole, like the strip was all like a million people every time you're there. Like you leave the places, you can't see sidewalk. It's all flyers.
It was insane. It was like Candyman. Yeah.
I would get there and I didn't really fit in with that scene too much personally. I would go there because it was easy. And I'd perch myself up on a wall somewhere between like the Whiskey and the Roxy. Somewhere down in there, I'd perch myself up and I would just sit there and talk to people and like hang out and kind of just lurk around. I didn't really do a lot of heavy pushing promotion. I just kind of hung out and lurked.
It's funny because that section of the wall had darker people like towards the Whiskey than the Gazzari's wall. There were different sections of wall.
It was different sections. There was a lot of, it was very tribal. It was clicky, but it was little pockets. You'd find your little
Creature down there. Remember Creature would hang down there and
I was just talking about those guys the other day. Yeah, Creature. The people who I found up, I guess like the people I wound up gravitating towards were all people who just weren't so soft. It just felt like there was a lot of like that kind of suburban rock band guy, right? Like that guy that kind of comes in for the weekend. Yeah. It seemed like a lot of that. And that didn't appeal to me. I found my people.
Right. And I get it because I was caught between those worlds. I wanted to be in Tough and I also wanted to be, in Rattlesnake Shake. I was like, both these things are cool. You know what I mean?
Well, your songwriting sensibilities have always had some kind of like an infectious hook to them. Right. I know the stuff that you've written for your band and like your stuff just stands out. Like you're just like a natural, you seek the hook.
Well, it's also the area that you grew up in. I grew up in Bruce Springsteen's hometown. So somehow that's going to, you know what I mean, eventually permeate. And I just, like you say, everything's just dumb luck because I had the little acoustic chord book and I just thought that's how you wrote, songs. And I saw Purple Rain and was like, wait, you just do that. Like, and you apply that to a rock band.
Do you remember any of the shows we played together? Do you remember any of those shows we did?
I do. The Coconut Teaser mostly is what I remember.
Yeah, mostly. We played a lot of teaser gigs. We did some Troubadour stuff, if I remember right.
Yes.
I think we did a couple whiskey things.
But the teaser was what I remember the most, just in the fun.
I miss that place on a weekly basis. Some story comes up with that place weekly.
Yeah, I think was special when you talk about a little bit darker, a little bit like and your friends kind of standing on the stage while you're playing. You know what I mean?
Everyone is right there in your face, like
or on the sides too. People just there's that side door to the patio. You just be playing, and your friends just be leaving while you're in the middle.
Yeah, you see your
not watching you. He's going out a door on the side of your stage while you're literally opening your door and going outside. And then you look and you see how many people were out while you were playing. You get mad.
Everyone is outside eating a hot dog. Everybody.
Yes, yes.
We did a lot of those teaser shows with the Yesterday's Tears guys that became
Yeah,
Drowned. We played with them all the time as much as we could. We love those guys.
yeah.
That was kind of like a group that we got lucky enough to be hooked up with for those guys.
They were so good. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember Alice in Chains praising them, then playing with Alice in Chains.
Hmm.
The first time Alice in Chains played club with
We
them.
got to play with Alice in Chains in like Long Beach and a couple other things. We did some shows with them through the person who actually, I believe, introduced our bands, which is Jody.
Jody, yeah, yeah.
Jody was like the great
Yeah.
common denominator for a lot of us.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. She was ground central.
She was kind of like, I think, always on the lookout. She had a
Wow.
really good ear and an eye for what was going on. She put a lot of things together for us too.
She's still so cool, right? I still talk to
Right.
her all the time. She's coming
I
out.
haven't talked to her in years, but yeah, she was always a big part of whatever I was doing back then.
I remember her friends in Alice. Oh, your friends in Alice in Chains gonna get a record deal. Yeah, right.
Right, right.
They're gonna be big, sure.
But that's part of one of those things. Like you can't tell anybody a story about that time frame and not sound like you're completely talking out of your ass.
Yeah.
But there was so much cross pollination between some of those bands from LA, some of the bands from Seattle, some like the New York bands would come through, and everybody winds up knowing everyone because it's really Hollywood is the biggest small town in the world.
Yeah, it really was. It was like a dormitory party of music, just unbelievable.
100%.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And the teaser, just having the amps there that you could just roll up and just play. It was like,
I mean, how many times did you play a show there because you couldn't afford rehearsal rent? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it was just, it was, and Len Fagan, just the whole thing. It's just the smell of the sawdust, the tacos, the beers, that in the fish bowls for 5 cent beer. It was a perfect breeding ground for creativity and stuff.
I lived with I was roommates with Desi Benjamin for a little while. Desi would hook me up on like if a band would drop out, he would just call and we'd just show up. So we got on a lot of last minute bills that way too.
That's how you build, right? You just took
Yeah.
at first you're in a party, you're building your band as many times as you can play, and then you start thinning it out and just trying to build it was a whole system.
Yeah. And then I got I developed more interest in my drinking and drug career than my music career.
Right,
and
right.
At the time when I split, I wound up I was living in when I went to go leave. Remember Pulp Fiction, the movie Pulp Fiction?
Oh yeah, my favorite.
So
movie.
the building that they walk into in the very beginning of that when they kill those kids, that was my building.
Oh really?
Yeah, and we had these rooftop parties after shows that were just fucking bananas. The whole roof of this entire apartment building full of kids, like the Roxy, wherever we were at, everybody would pile up onto the roof. And it was just a fucking zoo. And those were some of like the best times, but it was the last place I stayed at was that building. It was across from wherever that the Denny's that used to have the bar in it off Sunset by the highway.
Oh yeah. You
remember?
I know exactly where you're talking about. Down by Bronx.
Yeah, it was across,
right? Yeah,
across
yeah. Wow.
Yeah, the only Denny's you could get hammered in.
And the thing was then, like, the one thing that's different now, I mean, you still have excitement in life, but it really was the unknown. You didn't know what was going to happen when you walked out the front door. You didn't know if you're going to be in an apartment with Eddie Van Halen or with two girls from the Valley, like eating right. You just didn't know what was going to happen.
Scaling walls over by Rock and Roll Ralph's, getting into people's apartments, the studio club. Like, holy shit.
Yeah, you just didn't know.
Uh-huh.
Do you think all that stuff influences your art now? Because your art's got so much energy in it.
It has to, right? Like it has to. My musical sensibility, like what I still listen to and the things I'm still drawn to, it has to. I don't know for sure. Like I can't really say objectively, but it almost has to. I'm sure that what you spin when you're playing is going to come from that wealth of musical knowledge you developed.
Well, set list is kid. One thing that I'm different than most DJs is, instead of always being the same BPMs, remember our sets varied. You'd go from this, so I think more in those terms of rock terms of like, like maybe you don't need to be the same BPMs and you just drop into the ballad into, you know what I mean? I think of a rock set, as opposed to just matching BPMs. But one thing is your art doesn't feel like everybody else's, that post Frank Kozik, when everybody was imitating him, just a version of him. You seem like, I don't know why. I just love the airbrush and the pop of your whole thing. It seems like nothing else. It's like candy.
Did you ever see a movie called Rock and Roll? I see your heavy metal poster in the back, the movie Heavy Metal.
Yeah, I don't think I saw
There's,
that.
there's an animated movie called Rock and Rule, and the soundtrack is brilliant. It's like Blondie, Cheap Trick.
You know, you
Uh,
said that. I think I did because yes,
I think the Commodores or somebody are on there, like somebody like
yes,
that. It's
yes,
just wild '70s
yes.
conglomeration soundtrack. The artwork in that and the tone of that movie is probably one of my biggest inspirations for my artwork. And it's something I watch like all the time. In fact, I just bought a new copy of it. The thing's like $100 for a DVD of the thing now, but like stuff like that, or those old Kiss album covers, or any of that super high graphic, like the just like jumps out at you type imagery. Then something about like I don't know, Bowie stuff, like some of the artwork that he would use on some of
Yeah.
these things, like just something that I try to capture like a moment in what I'm doing. I don't do like a scene or whatever. I'm more focused on like one thing at a time. And it's got to be influenced by the music. It just, there's a lot of, I can tell a difference in a piece when I'm listening to one thing versus another. I mean, it all kind of like goes through the processor that is your brain and just comes out how it comes out. It's changed a lot lately too. Like what I do lately versus what I started with at that bar I was mentioning at, that was all like kind of tattoo flash, sort of lazy, Sacred Heart kind of.
That's, I mean, you pulled out from like you definitely, I guess, like everything, you find your style. It's really,
Yeah, I feel like after about 5 years ago, I feel like I really found my fingerprint. I feel like I really found a thing that's mine that I can work within. I mean, it's a little bit of, I got myself in a little bit of a box sometimes, but I'm okay there because it's what I want it to be. Like it's a fingerprint. That's the best way I can picture it. It's just it's my thumbprint.
yeah, you have to have somewhere where you stand and like, this is my thing.
Well, it's like if you hear a guitar player, you know who he is before you even see the face. Like you can tell, I can tell a drummer. Like I know who I'm listening to before anyone tells me what it is, and it's because an artist will find their thing, and you can't take that. It's just their voice, even though it's not vocal. It's a voice that they have. And there's artists that paint and draw, and like there's some guys I work with for shows that it's the same thing. I see somebody's piece and I know it's them before I could see like a piece of it, like a fraction of it, and I know who it's
Yeah.
going to be.
Well, I know yours, and I love the airbrush quality. Last year, I needed a logo for my band, and I actually went to the boardwalk and got a shirt airbrushed
Nice.
by the homeless guy that I had to skip because there's just something about that growing up, that airbrush quality.
Mm-hmm.
I love it so much.
That was a happy accident. The airbrush that I use. So I started as a kid. I mean, elementary school, right? Hip hop just starts. I've got friends from New York that come down for the summer in Florida, and I learn about hip hop and I learn about graffiti, and instantly I'm hooked. And then I pick up a rattle can, spray paint, anything I can put paint on, right? I get arrested because we find a water tower or a fence. We put our stupid names on it. So like they know exactly who it is because it's the kids in the neighborhood doing it.
Yeah.
But that's where I started, was the rattle can graffiti. And then I can't really do that in a small space, the fumes and what have you. So ultimately, a friend of mine, another artist, Menton Matthews, he was like, you should try airbrushing. I was like, I don't want to paint t-shirts at the boardwalk. I love that, but that's not what I'm trying to do. He's like, well, he showed me a way to incorporate airbrush as an actual artistic tool instead of just what airbrushing is. Cause there is a form that is airbrushing, which is what you're mentioning.
Yeah.
And I use it as an extra tool. And it's like, I do a lot of finger painting. So a lot of like the bigger shapes, I'm actually just kind of smearing paint around and getting stuff into shapes that I want. And then I fine tune it. And then I hit it with the airbrush to finish it all off. It's like the last step that ties it all together.
Because
and it's soft.
like, yeah, because yes, your stuff doesn't bum me out. Even though it's dark, it doesn't bum me. When you like, when I'd go into Lazoo, whatever that place on Melrose with all the death, but like, just, I
Love
don't
that
know
place.
if I want that in my day to day. It just bummed me out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I try to find myself somewhere in between, like pop surrealism is sort of what it's been called.
Okay.
By people who are smarter than me, looking at my work, telling me what I do. So that's always interesting too. But like, I'll accept pop surrealism because it kind of is that. It does have a brighter sensibility to it. So if I paint The Bride of Frankenstein, for instance, something about it is still going to be me, and it'll have some air of rock and roll to it. And I think that's really it is. I try to infuse that sort of rock and roll aesthetic into what I'm doing because it's all still in my head. the way I see things is still the same as when I was in bands.
Yeah.
I'm just using a different tool is what I'm kind of doing.
Because that style of rock and roll, even in hip hop, is just, there's nothing better than the style of rock and roll. The music itself comes and goes, but that style is just, I mean, think of it. That's why we love Tim Burton and Wednesday and the dance scene. It's so rock and roll.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That,
I was talking to a guy the other day about old hip hop, and he was talking about Africa Bambaataa. And I was like, Africa Bambaataa was just the fucking hip hop Kiss, like the costumes and the presentation. Like it's that same thing, just through a different lens, like a different sound behind it. If it's that big bombastic, that big T-Rex stomp, like whatever that thing is, I try to capture some of that in what I'm doing with my original work. I do a lot of stuff like fan art stuff and whatever. It's still me, but the stuff that's mine, like my original stuff, you'll see big giant gold stars and like hidden in things. You'll see, Nikki Sixx makeup on girls. You see like spikes and things on people. It's all the same. I'm just, instead of a mic, I got a brush, man.
What do you think of the art aesthetic? Because we both grew up that, like, I had Kiss's whole visual thing blew my mind, as did Crew for years. You know what I mean? How would you describe the differences in there? I mean, obviously.
So I'm 7 years old. My uncle lives at home with us because he's gotten kicked out of his house. My grandmother's kicked him out. So he's basically my older brother for a little while. And he's a music guy. I'm not really into bands yet because I'm 7. And he wants to go see a concert, but he's not allowed to go unless he takes me, because my mom thinks that if he's got me joined at the hip with him, he won't get in trouble. So those bands that we're going to see are Cheap Trick and Kiss. And it's, 77. So it's fucking Kiss.
Yeah.
But the first live band I saw was Cheap Trick. They're also the same band that I've seen Cheap Trick more than any band in my any band ever. I've seen them a million times. But when Kiss comes, so I can picture what, like, Cheap Trick, that's a bunch of guys playing music. I can fathom that. Meanwhile, my uncle has ditched me, and I'm at Lakeland Civic Center watching these bands by myself, surrounded by pot smoke, little 7-year-old kid standing on his seat yelling, and then Kiss happens. And I have no point of reference. I have no one to bounce this, to look at and be like, what the fuck is this? It is just pure, like, punch to the face. It's just fucking Kiss in 1977. And I'm 7 years old and I exploded.
That's insane. I saw
like
that too.
That's like around the same summer. I think it might have been the next summer that Kiss Meets the Phantom comes out.
Yeah.
And we're riding bikes yelling with Slurpee cups with Kiss on it. And like, I was Kiss Army day one. I mean, as soon as I saw that. So that was that's like the ground zero of my aesthetic for anything, really, is that big, holy shit, that thing, whatever that is, so, and that can look like anything. I mentioned being a kid and going to see Wasp. That was when they're throwing meat at people. Like, that was the Troubadour days. Like, that was wild shit. And I fucking ate it up. I was there for it.
It did. It hit. And then Crew, like you said, that was pretty large. After Kiss, then that hit, like, whoa, Looks to Kill.
I had a friend.
I found my way backwards. Shout at the Devil then, but it was pretty large.
My very first little girlfriend as a kid, her mom and her had moved from Hollywood, or from just the Valley maybe, to Clearwater, Florida. And they were the ones who introduced me to Motley Crue. And in fact, her and I became friends on Facebook not too long ago. We were just talking about how she turned me on to Motley Crue as a kid. And I was like, I'm just going to squarely blame you for that whole segment of whatever. But it follows the same theme. It's right in my wheelhouse. Anything that's like that, I'm absolutely gravitating towards the big theatrical, whatever that is, that big dirty rock show thing.
Yeah. God. And then, and so, and this all bleeds into your art. We're talking about, you have a book out. Did you tell me you have a book you did?
Yeah. It's Dodging Knives and Throwing Bullets. It came out a couple of years ago. You can find it on Amazon. If you search my name, it's on there still to this day. I sell them signed sometimes, but it was a big push. It was one of those things that came about purely by accident or coincidence. If you believe in those things, I don't really, but I was one of my last bands in Atlanta. I had a whole section of life in Atlanta that was just as tumultuous as my Hollywood days, but that's all another thing. But there was a magazine called Blue Blood that was kind of like a softcore goth semi-porn kind of thing where they did a lot of things with bands. They would like bring in a lot of bands and review them and go see shows and stuff. And I met them. Amelia and Forrest are the people who run that. And I met them in Atlanta. They interviewed me a few times for some different projects I was working on, but we stayed in touch. And I knew they were going to launch a new actual physical magazine. And I had a solo show coming up a few years ago. And I was like, hey, I sent this email, this total like shot in the dark type email of like, hey, I've got this thing coming up. You've got this thing coming up. Do you want to cross promote? Maybe give me like a little blurb, something like that. I'll flyer for your show. Like, you want to connect? And I didn't hear anything. I get radio silence. So I'm like, oh, they just think I'm just being some like pompous art dick. And what have I've overstepped my bounds is what I've done. And then I hear back from Amelia a few days later, and she's basically like, I don't want you in the magazine, but how do you feel about doing a book? And I lost my fucking mind. Wow. Like, yes, like a 1,000 times yes. Yeah. And so their publishing company put together the whole idea, how to do it, what we were going to do. We did like what's that, the crowdsourcing thing. We did all of that, a million interviews, talking to people, getting a buzz going. And then the book came out, and it's 8 years worth of work. It's 8 years worth of artwork that I put in there, and then interspliced with like quotes that I like from people like Evil Knievel, wow, Foghorn Leghorn, Kim Fowley, awesome, people who have had some kind of an effect on me that I've kept their words in my head. And so I put that in there. There's the opening section is, talking about some stuff that I've been through, but it's amazing how that came about. It was another one of those things where like something from my past was able to be accessed and connected something for my future. And now I have an art book. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Like I'm a published fucking author, man.
That's amazing. And people can get that. I'll put the link in. Is Amazon the best place for them to get it?
Yeah, Amazon, they can message me, but Amazon, it's available anytime. You can find it on there. It's like a print to order kind of situation with Amazon now.
And then you were showing me today, I've been looking at all your stuff, but the Jeffrey Dahmer, someone commissioned, that's insane. That picture's it's light. It's incredible.
It was a special request. It was a commission. I do a lot of commission work. Most of the time, if you see something I painted that you recognize, it's probably somebody asked me to do it. I don't paint a lot of like pop icon kind of stuff on my own unless somebody's paying me. And depending on how bad of an idea I think it is, that depends on how expensive it is. So if it's something I really want to paint, it probably won't cost that much more.
So if I want to get my buddy an Eric Carr painting, you can hire you and you'll do something like that.
Oh my God, I'd almost give it to you for free, an Eric Carr painting. Fuck yeah.
He just bought you see the Eric Carr vinyl. That was pretty cool. I couldn't get one. My singer, my band got one. It's pretty cool.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. I think those two, Vinny and Eric's photos on the solo albums that never came out, when you see those, I want to make a shirt of one of them that just
a shirt with both, one on the front, one on the back, but which one would you put where?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be the one that had to choose which one goes on which side.
But so cool. Yeah. Wow.
I think I'd put
Carr. How long does that take you to do something? I know it's a pedestrian question, but how long?
Oh, Jesus.
Like,
how long does a painting take?
The process. Just walk me through the Jeffrey Dahmer, and then walk me through one of your original, not original, but you know what I mean.
So when I'm at a show being an asshole to somebody who's just asking me a stupid question that maybe don't like them, I tell them I have this whole spiel of, well, I've been painting for X amount of years, so it took me this many years to be the guy that can paint that painting. But between you and I sitting here, it really, from the concept sketch to the finished product, is a couple days if I'm really inspired to go. Like I go quick. I don't like to drag things along if I can help it, because once I get something in my head, I really just need to get it out. And I start with a sketch on my tablet, and then I go. I just go.
I'm a big fan in music and anything in life now of immediacy, the energy of immediacy. Don't you think that there's something to be said, and you can analyze it?
If you're working on a song more than a couple of days, drop it.
Yeah.
It's not going to do it. Drop it or reconfigure. Something's, you got to let it go and regroup later.
Yeah. Like, what's the difference of one bass drum pattern that might be a little different if you recorded it today, as opposed to 6 months of fixing that? There's an energy to it. And there's an energy in your paintings. I mean, that's an energy.
Thank you. I try, and that's mostly I just like I said, once I start going, I have to see it through. I can't, take a week on a piece because I've got 5 others in the back I got to finish up. It's really about once that spark hits, I just go. And if it's not working, I come back to it maybe in a few months.
They feel like Iggy Pop, Backyard Babies, like horror movies, late night TV, Creature of the Black Lagoon. Like, am I right that all these things are coming? Slee Stacks, it's all coming.
Are you basically standing behind me as I work every night? Because that's exactly what it is.
That's what it feels like. You know what I mean? Like
I get up really early. I wake up about 5 and I'll get started on some stuff. Sometimes I'll work a little bit before the kid wakes up, and then I'll come back in and lay down and kind of wait around for him to get ready for school. And then when I get him to school, I come back, work some more. And then after he goes to bed, before my wife gets home from work, I spend all of that time working. And it's usually everything you just said is probably playing in the studio with me as like a TV's going, the music's going. It's all at the same time. It's just a big clusterfuck of everything. But the
clusterfuck. That's what we're talking about. Pulp Fiction. That's a clusterfuck of all this garbage. You know what I mean by garbage?
Yeah, it is. No, it's all
stuff that nobody would have put together, and it became my favorite movie of all time. But it's
one of your playlists. It's a mixtape for your girlfriend. It's a whatever. It's everything. It's a collage of who you are. That's really what it winds up being. It winds up being all of these pieces, parts that make up who you are. The stuff that's on the wall behind you, the stuff that's like behind me, all of these books that we have, all these whatever it is. Each and every painting gets some of that. It feels like I feel like something of all of that winds up in there. Be it an attitude, a sneer, a way an eye goes. Like it's all in there, and I don't think we can help it. It's the same as when you pick up if you pick up a musical instrument. It's everything you are all at once.
Yeah. I remember as a kid, like even remember Dogs D'Amour. You're like, wait, Tyler makes their artwork too. It made it.
He's one of the most inspiring painters ever, and I listen to them still to this day daily. I listen to the Dogs all the time, and I've actually become loose internet pen pals with him and another couple of guys. Another amazing painter that you might not know that he paints, Zodiac from Zodiac Mind Warp, is an amazing artist. He's also an incredible. If you can ever track down his fucking books, get them. They're brilliantly awful. Like they're so. The profanity usage is an art form in itself. He is a brilliant writer. But Tyler and all of that artwork he did, it's so him. There's nobody else that could really do that. It's so like it's the faces and Rolling Stones. It's all of those things. His artwork's brilliant.
Which is yours too, but I mean, you have your own. You're not emulating it. You have your thing, and it's like you say, it's hard sometimes, like when you're like doing your thing to stick to your thing because you look over here like, oh, it'd be cool to be that guy. You know what I mean?
Dude, if you think about the Dogs D'Amour and you remember Dynamite Jet Saloon, remember how the back of the sleeve had that pink line that looked like a torn piece of parchment?
Mm-hmm.
If I ever write you a letter, your address will be inside of a lined out thing that looks just like that. And I've been doing it for fucking years.
That's
just
amazing.
Totally ripped it off.
It's so cool. Yeah, that was.
I love it.
I mean, but you've done that yourself. It's just it's rock and roll artwork without being, like you say, tattoo artwork. You know what I mean? Tattoo.
Yeah, man. That's it. I don't want to be a cliche tattoo artist. Like nothing wrong with that. Of course, it's just not what I want to be. I want something else that's, I've done some album artwork. I've done some flyers for friends. I've done things like that. I just did this beautiful jacket with Mark Vaughn that we were just talking about from Funhouse. That he sent me this leather jacket to paint on, let me do whatever the fuck I wanted. I sent it back to him and he studied the thing out. And then it wound up coming back to me again. And I sold it to one of my collectors. And so like all these collaborations and things, but like, I just get inspired by these guys and I wind up something in me. I just stay drawn to it. And it winds up translating into what I do without being ripped off. I hope that's my big fear would be to have somebody be like, oh, you're just ripping off whatever.
Yeah. But that's part of putting yourself out there. Some people never put themselves out there. That's you got to be able to handle it. If yourself out there.
I get it a lot. I just had a guy that I've known for a really long time, and he said some stuff in a comment, and I know he was joking, but it hit a nerve, right? Hit me in a spot, and I was like, I'm not going to say anything to you, but fuck you, man. Like
it does. It's a second, no matter how much
stung. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I had a comment the other day. Someone's interviewing, someone wrote on the, well, if he would have let you talk. And actually, the person I interviewed stuck up for me, but I was like, for a second, I wanted to find the guy's IP address and kill it. You know, I'd be like, it's like that's part of putting yourself out
We're
there.
just sensitive, man.
Yeah, but putting yourself out there. Some people will never put their stuff out there. It's a big
Yeah.
step.
Yeah, it's true. I know a lot of people that are brilliant artists and brilliant musicians that they've never done anything with it. And I always wonder, like, how do you live with that inside of you and not put it someplace out in the world, be it with your name on it or somebody else's or something? Like, I mean, a really good friend of mine's been a songwriter for years. You'd never know what he did, but like he gets that stuff out of him somehow, and it's his version of what we're talking about.
Yeah. And now you go to these conventions, different conventions with your art and show up. What's that about?
So the wife and I both do conventions now. It started off, I left my last day job maybe 14 years ago. I don't know. It's been a long time. And it was around when I was talking about when I painted those paintings. And I was doing I'd gotten invited to do a group art show that was based on the Muppets. And it was Muppets. Every painting sold went to go to support children's autism, to go help with research for that. It was through the Henson family. And I'm working this crappy phone job, and I'm at home at night painting these paintings. I put them on Facebook, they sell. I got to paint another one, they sell. And great problem to have, but I'm running out of paintings and I need these paintings for the show, but they keep selling. And then I got this job and I'm just miserable and I'm getting torn. And so I wound up quitting the job and going and doing that show. And that show was one of the first big shows. And that show also introduced me to some people who invited me to do a horror convention. They were like, if you can paint some monsters and stuff that's in this style, I'm sure you'll do good at this convention. And it was my first one. And I went and it did really good. And from then on, I was hooked. I don't really like to do a lot of gallery shows, but I like to do big art conventions. And it's just something that the wife and I can do together now, because she does taxidermy and some other stuff that's beautiful and amazing. And we travel well together, and we get to go to do these events on the road sometimes. And sometimes they're here in town, but it's, it's the full-time gig. I do the commission stuff, but most of my bread and butter is these conventions.
That's awesome.
And they're great. You wind up seeing people. I see people at these conventions that you and I have probably known for a million. I've seen people from LA. I've seen people from New York. People come to visit. They surprise you. Bands come through. We do this thing, Earth Day Birthday, every year. The local radio station here has it. And so they bring big bands in and they play. It's at a big giant field. And Buck Cherry played not too long ago. And of course, like we shared a warehouse with those guys years ago when it was Josh's old band. And so Stevie and those guys would come through the tent. The crowd would see it. They'd come see what the hell they're doing. They'd buy stuff and leave. Stevie'd come back and say hi some more. Some more people would see him and come in and buy more stuff. These conventions wind up being a homecoming. Like, it's not just about selling out, but you wind up seeing friends on the road. And man, I love that.
God,
I love that.
I'm sure. And it's got to be a thrill. I was thinking, because like when you write a song, if you have a song and it's played while you're sleeping, I always think that's so cool. It's you're sleeping and someone's listening to your song in a different part of the world, or that your stuff is hanging in so many houses. Like, isn't that's got to be a cool feeling that people are walking in rooms seeing your soul while you're sleeping or getting your coffee or whatever you're doing.
I have a couple of collectors whose names you would recognize. And the idea that my work is in somebody's house that has inspired me in that way. Somebody who I've been listening to since I'm 14 years old has my painting in his bedroom or something like. It's mind blowing how this circular, because like I said, I don't believe in coincidences. I try to take that shot and talk to people who have inspired me and let them know, like, hey man, thank you for whatever. And sometimes it turns into a friendship, and sometimes that can turn into a collaboration like Mark and I, or sometimes that can turn into just a guy who collects artwork and says, hey man, can you do this thing for me? And of course I say yes, because that's what I do. And it winds up just being like, yeah, I think about it all the time. There's somebody in my mind right now that he has like 6 paintings of mine, and I have probably the same amount of records of his. So it's perfect.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. I mean, the whole existence of it is so cool. You won the game, went through the battle, and are winning the game.
You know, I didn't make the splash in the music community that I wanted to, but I landed there somehow anyway. I still feel like I've got I've got the connection still to where I feel good about where I'm at. Does
I
that make sense?
agree. It's a
Right.
different existence, and you see these guys, some of these guys that are huge that are just not. It's just not. There's no massive gold ring. You're doing your thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And still and creating, making something wasn't there, and then you put. That's I think the craziest thing is nothing's there. Now something's there.
Dude, I sell something no one ever needs. I,
It's-
what I do, no one ever has a need for particularly. Like I'm so grateful for that, but it makes me giggle sometimes, you know.
I get it. And one thing that I find with my job actually, which I'm sure you can relate with, is I can go in my room like tonight. I'll go get some songs ready to DJ this weekend. It's fun not relying on a band because you can work as hard as you want and you're not held up by some guy that wants to do something else. I really like being my work. I can work as hard as I want and get results.
Part of what I fell out of love with in music was when I became the responsible one.
Yeah.
Right. When I was the guy scheduling this, or when I was the guy setting this up. One of the last bands I was at in Atlanta, it was a great band. We were doing really good. We had a lot of good connections. We had a residency at a bar that was like the cool bar. You know, we had this thing going on. It was like our night. So like everyone knew that this one particular night of the week, this band is playing, and it was like a scene for a minute. That feeling like how you guys had the church is like the thing. So, but it wound up being a drag because I had to book everything. I had to make sure the PA got set. I had to make sure that the sound, like, why am I was like the biggest fucking mess at the time too. And I wind up being the one. And I was like, I don't want to do all of the work part, but we don't have enough money to hire a guy to do the work part yet. So we all need to do it, or we all need to don't do it. And it wound up just being don't do it.
Yeah, I think it's we both don't drink. I almost call it the drink karma. Like I'm working off my drinks. I feel like I said it one day. Okay, I've officially worked it all up, man. I owe no penance anymore. I'm on.
Did you actually like quit and go through a thing, or did you have
no? Dude, one day I was just like, I'm out. Everybody does it. Like I know it's 14 years ago because I know it was it was New Year's Eve. I'm like,
oh wow.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we all drank about the same. I think we all had our own handle of whatever we were drinking on us at all times, right? Like, at least I thought we were all drinking the same back then. I could have been wrong.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You know, I was living with the glamour punk, so anything's possible. So, but towards the end there, man, like I'm over a decade. I'm over 12 years now. I haven't had a drink, but I had to do some stuff. I'm not one of those. I couldn't just hang it up. I had issues.
Yeah. No, we all have different ways we do it, but I think the joy is having something that makes you happy, that you put work in and you get a result. Because sometimes with the band, your work and result isn't the same as when you do something yourself. You know what I mean? I have friends in bands that do stand-up comedy. I still love being in a band and doing it, but there is something about doing something in life that isn't like
it's yours.
A work. You get, there's a payoff for your work, and I don't just mean financial. I mean just spiritual.
No,
whatever,
the financial part is wonderful, but the fulfillment part is, of course, what the root of the thing is, and it's something that's yours, that you can do, that you're responsible for. It's like I talk about with people sometimes about when I quit that last day job. The scary part of quitting my last day job was that now I don't have anyone I can blame. I don't have, the only person I can rely on is me. I can't borrow money from the boss. If the rent is going to get paid, I better have paintings to sell to pay it. And it was terrifying because I know how irresponsible I fucking am. I know what a mess I can be, and I got to rely on me. I'm in trouble. But I took that leap, and it wound up, 14 years later or whatever, I push paint for a living.
That's awesome, man. Well, give me all the links so I can give people links to getting all your stuff and in touch with you. What's the best ways they can, if they want to paint?
I'm super easy to find, man. I'm the only Vaughn Belak on the planet.
Okay.
I'm the one. If they look me up, they'll find all of that. It's super easy. VaughnBelak.com is a thing. It's not very updated, but that's got all the links already on it. Instagram, Facebook, I'm on there pretty active. That's where I sell most of my stuff when I sell mine. But like the cool part about all of those really for me isn't even about the business stuff. It's things like being able to connect with you, being able to connect like friends from who the fuck knows what part of life.
Totally.
because somewhere like you leave LA or you leave whatever, and you think you're never going to see these friends again, only to find out we're all still connected, like you were saying.
And it started with MySpace. Like we all had that. We had a different experience than most people. You know what I mean?
I've only been able to make it out for one of the Blackboard Jungle reunion shows, and that show was right when I quit drinking, and so I was a complete fucking mess. Like I was psychotic of a mess. But I went with Skits, and I can't remember. I think a few other friends of ours were involved with getting me there and all of that. And when I got there, it was exactly what everybody always talks about in the posts afterwards. It's such a homecoming.
That's what it is.
Oh, it was so good. It was so good. I haven't been able to get back out, but like it was so good. And
we'll be there forever. We had a strange generation. We hit the street because everybody before us, they were handing out record deals. We'd all have record deals and be talking, you know what I mean? And they didn't. So we got something else. We got the internet to keep in touch. We got different, we just had a different experience. We were the end, but we were the end. You know what I mean?
We were. Nobody could do the same things we were doing back then. There's no way anyone could ever get away with half the shit we were doing, running around Hollywood.
Yeah. And things end and things change, but we had a special time, and it continues to be special. I'm glad we're all still in touch.
I am too, man. It's great to talk to you.
Well, we'll say goodbye to everybody and hang out so I could say goodbye to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for anybody who watched this. Get in touch, VaughnnBelak.com, or just fucking find me because I'm sure you probably got my number.
We forgot one. We need the story of how you met Kenny.
How I met Kenny.
Yeah.
So we talked about Jody a little while ago, and I was living with Jody, and we would stay up real late, doing what we were doing, to stay up very late for days on end. And one night we were crank calling people, because back then you still could. There was no star 69. You just crank call people and hang up and giggle. Like that was all fun and games. And so she gave me Kenny Price's phone number. I had not met him yet, didn't know him. I think we might have played a show at the Coconut Teaser, so you can imagine how this went over, since you know him so well. And we started crank calling him at like 3 in the morning. 1,000,000 o'clock in the morning, we're crank calling him. And I am saying some of the most horrendous things about his mother, his girlfriend's shoes are under my bed. I'm just like ripping him. And then we'd hang up and giggle, and we would wait, and then we would do it again in a week. And I did this for I think a couple months. And then I'm sitting on the strip one night in that spot that we were talking about, just kind of dangling my feet. And you guys come walking by, and I go, "Hey, Kenny." And I said something from one of the phone calls, and he kept walking, and he stopped. He's like, "You motherfucker." It was one of those moments I will never, ever forget. And that's how I met Kenny, was that phone adventure.
Phone adventures, prank calls, Jerky Boys stuff.
Man, it was Jerky Boys stuff. It was so good though. He was so mad. He laughed his ass off, but he was so mad.
That's amazing.